All right, welcome to this special Mount Rushmore edition of Locked On Ole Miss, the podcast. We're going to do our Mount Rushmore's continue, and we're going to talk about Egg Bowls this time on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to do another Mount Rushmore. We're going to continue to do this throughout the offseason. We're having to start this a little early because of renovations to the palatial Central Florida studio and kind of where that leaves us. We're kind of starting to put that back together, but we're not quite there. We're about 2 weeks away from that happening. It'll be about 95% done come Wednesday, though. So I'm pretty happy about that, and we can start working on the improvement of the palatial Central Florida studio. But we're doing this to prevent interruptions to service to you as much as possible. Remember, this channel, we're about commentary and perspectives. We're not about reporting the day-to-day. We're not about doing any of that stuff. We're supposed to talk about whatever's important to Ole Miss football. So whatever's in the sphere of Ole Miss Sports, whether the teams, the players, the coaches, the media, everything, we're going to talk about it. It's going to upset some people from time to time. I don't really care about anything about that. We're not relying on access to players, to coaches, or anything like that, and we're not asking you for money. So we're completely uninhibited. We can have some fun doing this. All right, so Mount Rushmore's today. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So do us a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell for notifications of new videos going up, and of course, upvote the video itself. If we get to 1,000 subscribers, which it really looks like it's going to happen, but if we do, we're going to do a live post-game show following Ole Miss games this year, complete with former players, high school coaches, and all this. We're going to do all of this stuff. It's going to be about 30 minutes long. This over here, this is going to be a chat module. If you want to see what it's kind of going to look like, tune in to SEC After Dark on YouTube on the Y'all's Conference Network channel. You might see that pop up from time to time in your feed. I'm also a part of that. I designed that, so the set will probably look a little bit like that. All right, Mount Rushmore. Egg Bowls. What are the 4 Egg Bowl games that stick out? Now, I was born in 1976. My first game that I saw of Ole Miss playing was the Egg Bowl in 1982. Steve Sloan's last game was my first game. But so from there forward is kind of going to be the ones that stuck in my mind. If you have another opinion, I saw some people on our Mount Rushmore about quarterbacks talk about Glenn Griffin and Charlie Connerly and all that, and that's absolutely fine. I just have no frame of reference for those guys. So absolutely in the comments below, tell me what your Mount Rushmore Egg Bowls are and why the games or a game is important to you. So participate down below. I'd appreciate that very much. But anyway, my Mount Rushmore begins now with the 1983 Egg Bowl. The Immaculate Deflection. There's games that stand out because they get a name. You know, that's kind of the big thing in these rivalry games. They get a name. And the Immaculate Deflection probably cemented my fandom in Ole Miss football. To see that live, I was at the game. I was on about the 35-yard line on the side of the field where Artie Cosby was attempting that 27 or 28-yard field goal. That game was going to be over. When the ball went up, the state crowd started cheering. As it slowed down, the Ole Miss side started cheering. And it was just a completely surreal thing that I have not seen anything like it until now. And I probably will not see anything like it. It was a pure pandemonium type event. And it's amazing. I mean, if you take into account what that Immaculate Deflection meant, Ole Miss was back in a bowl game for the first time in 12 years, which, you know, as I've gotten older, doesn't seem like a terribly long period of time. We're at the point now where Eli Manning playing quarterback is almost twice as much as back then at the Immaculate Deflection. Archie playing quarterback before, so it wasn't that much of a thing. Like if you want to do apples to apples, the Eli Manning thing and would have been like 2015. That would have been the 12-year mark going on. So it's a goofy, interesting thing. But that meant a revival of sorts, even going to Shreveport in the Independence game, which would become our home away from home. But at that point, it was a very big deal. We lost the game against Air Force, ended up 6-6. But, Buford McGee got a bowl game there. Kelly Powell ended up the season like 5-1 or something like that. There's a lot of good things that happened to Ole Miss football on the way. Now, in 84, they struggled a little bit. 85, they struggled a bit. 86, they kind of came back a little bit. So, what it meant, and also my age of it just completely standing out, really helped with Ole Miss's ability to be back in that 1983 Immaculate Deflection game. Just one field goal. It was like a butterfly effect thing. One field goal. So much change going forward. And that was in Jackson. I was growing up in Florence, Mississippi. I was right down the road. So the games in Jackson were the ones I was able to go see. I didn't make it up to Oxford until, I think, 89 was my first game up there. And actually, it was the Georgia game. Little John Darnell to Reed Hines action. But that was probably the game that stands out most in my mind. The number 2 game, the second game that I want to talk about on this Mount Rushmore is The Stand. 1992, the Red Death defense, Mississippi State having something like 12 plays inside the 10-yard line and unable to score any points. I mean, it was the most bizarre thing. They'd get down to about the 2-yard line. Ole Miss would push them back. Ole Miss turns the ball over. They get the ball right back. They try again. They get a first down because of a pass interference. And it just doesn't work. The famous clip of Chad Brown busting through the line and attacking the running back was from that game. Now, what I remember also about that game is how cold it was that day. It was bitterly cold for Mississippi. Mississippi doesn't get the coldest in the world. They get bitterly cold that day. It was probably 22, 23 degrees. It was like ice storm weather, like permafrost weather. It was very unusual for the state of Mississippi. But that's a game like Corey Philpott really stands out to me, mainly because of that game. It was somebody that, you thought about Randy Baldwin. It's like, okay, Randy Baldwin in 89 was special. Randy Baldwin in 90 was special. How are we going to replace that? Here comes Corey Philpott, a little quick guy that kind of was Jerry and Ely before Jerry and Ely. And the offense that they ran back there was not really conducive to his style of running the ball, the way he was built. He would be a much better spread offense guy. But if you look at it, that game right there really set back. And I think in 92 Ole Miss went and played Air Force in the Liberty Bowl and shut them out as well. And that defense was really, really good. I think it might have been Tim Bowens and Norman Hand and all of those guys. That was the year, either 92 or 93 was the year Cassius Ware nearly killed Eric Zier, dropping back on a sack. And Abdul Jackson scooped and scored from like 60 yards out against Georgia. Another Georgia game. Why does that stick up in my memory from time to time? That's absolutely bizarre. But those are the first 2. We're going to come back with the next 2 games. We're going to go a little bit more modern. There's 3 before the turn of the century, 1 after the turn of the century, and a couple of honorable mentions that I'll want to talk about. And then our contributors will give you the games that stand out to them. Imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I have never had anything like this before. They're available right now, and we can't promise that they'll be available tomorrow, so get them today at Built.com. And if you haven't tried the puffs, I'll let you in a little secret, because that's what friends do. A chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar? Yeah, you heard me. Delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. Make every day your birthday with a Built birthday cake puff. Built has taken the delicious experience of biting into a fresh slice of birthday cake and robed it in 100% white chocolate and added sprinkles. So go to Built.com and get birthday cake puffs now. I don't know why I'm trouble saying that. Anyway, here's your offer. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's all one word. Use LOCK15 as the promo code for 15% off at Built.com. All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure to go check out Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Strayman, Sean Ferris, and Leif Thulin to give fans an in-depth look into NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and, of course, Big Boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. So, I give you my first two. My first one was the Immaculate Deflection. My second one was the Stand. You know, games that have a nickname. Big games in history. And these are ones that happened in my lifetime. One happened when I was 7 years old, and the other one happened when I was like 15. You know, something like that. 15 or 16. I don't know how old it was the second one. So, big games, big moments. And that was also in a period where Ole Miss was essentially the dominant program in that rivalry. I think Ole Miss won 8 times in 10 games over the decade. Now, starting in the 90s with the hiring of Jackie Sherrill, which the first game against Jackie Sherrill would have been 91, so the Stand would have been his second Egg Bowl. It started to even out. And since then, the series has been fairly even. And I've explained exactly how that happened and why that happened, and I'm not going to get into that now. But it made this game more heated, more hated. Jackie Sherrill brought a little bit of gasoline into it, a little bit Dan Mullen level of gasoline. And whenever Billy Brewer moved on, and by moved on, I mean got fired for NCAA violations, we hired Tommy Tuberville. And the first year, it was in 95, Tuberville was able to win the game behind Dew Innocent running for 242 yards. The second year, 96, State was able to get him back. So it was kind of a reverse thing to where Ole Miss would win at Starkville and lose in Oxford. It was kind of a weird element that was happening. Well, 97 hit. Both teams were ostensibly playing for a bowl game. If State won, they were going to go to a bowl game. If Ole Miss won, they were going to go to a bowl game, but probably not both of them. I think State was 6-5. Or at that point 5-5 or something like that, and Ole Miss was 6-4 or something like that. Don't hold me to that. It was a game where Ole Miss scored early in the game to take a 7-0 lead, and then State just took over the game. But they couldn't score touchdowns, so they scored one touchdown and another one. It was 14-7 right at the end of the game, and Ole Miss got the ball back. Well, Stuart Patrick, who should have gotten mentioned in my quarterback as an honorable mention, did not. I apologize for that. Basically, for this drive, he should have been mentioned. He was able to take the team down the field, complete a touchdown pass to Andre Roan. It was about a 20-yard touchdown pass on a post pattern. He scored, and it was 14-13. Now, if you go back to 2019 and the Piss and the Miss, they didn't go for 2. They weren't going to. They missed the extra point. Yada yada yada. That's all distant news. So I'm just saying, if you look at that, you'll know how exceptional it was that Tommy Tuberville did go for 2. And they went for 2, and they ran a really, I would say a quick slant, but it was a really quick slant. It was a play that the receiver you would think of from where he is, his depth should have been about 4 yards deep in the end zone, but he just got over the line. Stuart Patrick threw it low. Corey Peterson caught it. Ole Miss won the game. And it was a big moment. 15-14, the 2-point conversion. Everybody remembers that. That was a big moment for Ole Miss football. That was a big moment for Stuart Patrick. It was a big moment for the class that was coming up, because the class that was coming up that people were getting ready to be introduced to was Deuce McAllister, Rufus French, Terrence Metcalf, those guys coming up. And, Grant Hurd, who I worked with at Ole Miss, really good dude. So that was a big game because it basically allowed Ole Miss to, plant a flag that they're back. This is here. This is real. And it was basically a bunch of walk-ons and all that, because Ole Miss was like 15 player recruiting classes in 1995 and 1996. I mean, they really got hammered. And 97 was the first one that was real, and they recruited to it, and they got all kinds of good players. But they also got players to walk on. And talk them into doing it. I don't know how they did it, but players like Matt Luke at Gulfport High School signed with Ole Miss. He was a walk-on. He was 250-pound center, played undersized, but he had a heart. He ended up being just a legend on the field. There's going to be people that have a take about his head coaching or his coaching experience, and because of that, they're going to dog all of him. His role of being a center was invaluable to that team. He was in the game, hurt, on that two-point conversion play, snapping the ball to Stuart Patrick. He's the guy that got Booger McFarland at LSU, 10th ranked LSU, when Ole Miss took him down that same year. This was the year that Ole Miss kind of announced themselves as being back. Now, I'm super glad it happened, but it is. Now, our last place on the Mount Rushmore is 2014. It's a game where at different points in the season, both Ole Miss and State were in the playoff rankings. It was the first year of the playoff. Mississippi State had fallen to number 4 in the playoff rankings by the time the Egg Bowl happened. But at one point, they were number 1 in the country. And Ole Miss was 3 or 4, something like that in the first playoff rankings. But Ole Miss they dropped a game at LSU. The Auburn Laquan Treadwell leg break happened, and then Arkansas happened, and that kind of threw them into a tizzy. Well, Bo Wallace was hurt. They had different issues in that whole game, but Jalen Walton really stood up. Evan Ingram had a big game. Bo Wallace hobbled his way to winning that game. Some big wins by Bo Wallace. I don't think people take him seriously. They heard too much of that good Bo, bad Bo stuff, and they take it as gospel of what he is. He was an average quarterback. He was not an average quarterback. Ole Miss is not where they are right now if Bo Wallace doesn't transfer to Ole Miss from Northeast Mississippi. Period. Absolutely period. Now, you talk about the recruiting class that came after that. That class doesn't happen without Bo Wallace. Ole Miss got to 6 wins that first year, and it was basically because of Bo Wallace. You were able to recruit those guys that eventually got you to a Sugar Bowl, and that was because of Bo Wallace. And so I will respect that always. And and of course him beating Alabama. But that game was unbelievable. It was one of those that just the atmosphere. It's like Mississippi State couldn't handle the level that game had gotten up to. It had gotten so big they couldn't speed up anymore. And like I told you and have told you many times in team sports is about trying to speed up your team past what they're comfortable playing. If they are comfortable going 50 miles an hour, you want them at 55. Because you're comfortable at 55. And that's the reason people, whenever they talk about that, they play down to personnel teams and stuff like that. That's what they're talking about. They're playing slower. They want them to play faster. They want to get the other team out of the comfort zone. They want them to make mistakes. And in that game, Ole Miss came out ready to play. Ole Miss came out with a little, let's see, blood in their piss. They were ready to go. They'd been beaten up earlier in the season. But they weren't going to lose this game. And they actually just came out and took it to Mississippi State. To where it was obviously fairly early in the game to where Mississippi State was not going to come back and win this. Ole Miss was going to win this game. There was a trick play in there. Jordan Wilkins threw a touchdown pass. Jalen Walton had the 91-yard touchdown run. I mean, it was fantastic. Anyway, coming up after the break, we will have our contributors talking about their favorite Egg Bowl games. And we will get out of here, honestly. We'll give you a little bit about back of your day. So thank you very much for tuning into this. You'll hear from our contributors and me after the break. And then in the future, like next week, the future, we're planning on a Modern Wins Mount Rushmore and a Ole Miss head football coach Mount Rushmore. That'll be our next position in there. We haven't done those quite yet, but that's kind of what we're going to do. So this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you will need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry. you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So you can save time and auto when using rockauto.com. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, so you can go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write "Locked On," 2 words, in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including iTunes. Don't forget to rate and review us there on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. You can say whatever you want to say. Just give us a 5-star review. It will help others find this podcast in the future whenever they search it on iTunes. So that's the iTunes. Rate and review. 5-star review. Say whatever you want to say. Now, all right, you've heard from me. You've heard my Mount Rushmore. Number 1, 83. Number 2, 92. Number 3, 97. Number 4, 2014. Now let's hear what our contributors have to say.
So, the big 4 for me anyway, for Egg Bowl wins. Number 1 is the 1983 Egg Bowl, the Immaculate Deflection. That was something wonderful to see. Thought for sure we were going to lose. And then that happened there in the last few seconds. Number 2 for me was the 97 Egg Bowl, which was very, very hard to watch. We were losing most of the game, and then we came back, and of course, Corey Peterson caught that 2-point conversion, and we won that game. Number 3, after State had beat us many years in a row, the 2012 Egg Bowl, where we fed Moncrief. That was number 3. And number 4, I've got a 4A and a 4B. That's probably not exactly right, but I couldn't help it. My 4A and 4B are 2014 and 2015. Not very many people gave us a chance in 2014 with a hobbled Bo Wallace and not a lot of receiving help, especially after Vincent Sanders got hurt in the beginning part of the ball game. And basically with a tight end and a very small running back named Jalen Walton and a hobbled Bo Wallace, we beat State. And then the next year, of course, we dominated them, and in Starkville, and those are my top 4 Egg Bowls.
Okay, so top 4 Egg Bowls. Number 1 has to be 1997. Man, this game, 50-yard line brawl to start at the game. You know, Egg Bowl tradition. Completely dominated by State in this game until the last 2 minutes. Partridge hits Roan for touchdown, takes a 64-yard drive, hits Roan for that touchdown. With 2 minutes left in the game, 25 seconds left, they get the 2-point conversion. Then Strickland with the interception to win the game. Got bowl berth, kept State from going to a bowl. 1997 was a great Egg Bowl memory. Next in that, 2003, Eli shutout, sent Sherrill with his second loss and worst loss in his tenure as he retired from State. That game had a lot going. Eli really had a great game, 260 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also, if you remember in that game, it's kind of foreshadowing of the first David Tyree catch. If you remember, tight end Lilly catching that weird catch that popped off a defender, and he catches it and brings it in the ground for a touchdown. So kind of a little foreshadow into the Manning big game touchdowns. 2014 would be my next one. Hugh Freeze, Bo Wallace. Bo Wallace had the sprained ankle. Treadwell was out. We see Walton and Wilkins really just stole the show. Wilkins had a 30-yard bomb to Cody Core for a touchdown. Walton with 91 yards. on a run that was designed to the right, and he cut left and just saw green. So one of my favorites, upset the number 4 Mississippi State, kept them from going to the SEC championship, kept them from winning the West. So can't say anything like not better than doing that. Finally, obviously, 2017. If you really look at it, what happened in 2017, it's insane to believe absolutely everything that went on during this game. I mean, it starts out with the Leo Lewis blowing the kiss, and then you have Fitzgerald flipping the bird on the cart on the way out. You have AJ claiming Starkville as his city and his touchdown. You got DK with the infamous dog pit. You got Speaks with the wave after the fumble recovery, and then he gets ejected moments later. They planted the flag. I mean, that began the Matt Luke era, but man, what a game that was in 2017.
All right, now we're talking about great Egg Bowls, right? Obviously the ones you win, most of them kind of have a special place in your heart because you just love beating Mississippi State. But one of the very first ones I remember was the Corey Peterson 2-point conversion. We were sitting in the living room. It was down in Starkville, obviously. And my dad was sitting up in his recliner, and we had just scored the touchdown, and you look around and, everybody's Cheryl sending the field goal block team out there, and he looks over and Tommy Tuberville's just holding up those 2 fingers. And, as soon as you see those 2 fingers, you can see Cheryl put his hands on his head, just running around, throwing up 2. They're going for 2. They're going for 2. And about that time, my dad popped out of his recliner, and he was standing up watching it. And, we ended up hitting Peterson and come across the back of the end zone there for the 2-point conversion. And, we all just start going crazy. My dad gets down on his knees, scooting across that carpet, and he's just got carpet burns from his shins all the way up to his knees. That was probably my favorite Egg Bowl memory. But then the one in Oxford, it was, like 08 or 09, something like that. But it was the negative 63-yard rushing game that State had where that poor quarterback, Tyson Lee, I think he was playing quarterback for State that year. And, man, that kid just got beat all game long. Parade Jerry and Jarrell Poe, Marcus Tillman, I think, was defensive end back on that team. That was really, really fun to watch, even though it was a 40-something to nothing game, and they couldn't even get past midfield. Wasn't nobody leaving Vaught Hemingway Stadium that day just to see if we actually could continue to keep them on the other side of the 50 and keep them in the negative rushing yards. So that one was a lot of fun too.
There you have it. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Tomorrow we'll be back to normal. Kara McCutcheon will be on talking about social aspects. We've got Tom Vanderford coming up Friday. Now make your second listen Locked On SEC. Get all of your SEC news in less than 30 minutes with SEC expert Chris Gordy. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. All right. Peace.